Hey, Arctic family and friends. I was thinking yesterday about grit. And I want to take you on a journey, if you would be so patient as to go with me. Now, it's November the 8th, 1949. November the 8th, 1949. Most of you were not alive. I certainly wasn't. But on November the 8th, 1949, in the Durst family, Richard Durst Sr. and my grandma, Grandma Betty, so Elizabeth Durst, Betty Durst, they were a young married couple. He was 29 years old. I think Grandma is a couple years younger than him. They had a 3-year-old named Mary Edna. That's my aunt. They had a little boy who was 13 months old, Richard Jr. That is my dad. That is Richard Durst, the CEO and president of Arctic Express. And Grandma Betty was pregnant with a baby who, when born, was named John. To me, Uncle John. Or to many of you who've known the Arctic family for an extended period of time, John Durst, who ran operations for over 30 years for Arctic. Now, on November the 8th, 1949, everything was going fine. And on November the 9th, 1949, Richard Durst Sr. was killed on the job, and everything changed. If you could imagine being now a single mom in the late 1940s, and the trials and tribulations that you now faced. Grandma moved back in with her parents. She really had no other way of surviving. She went to work and also went to school at night. She went to college to get her degree to become a school teacher. And I'll tell you guys, she is the definition of grit. If you go on the internet and you look up grit, you will find that it is defined as courage and resolve or strength of character. And I think, to me, what grit means is that you simply never give up. Quitting is not an option. And when it's 1950 and you have 3 kids to take care of, and yes, you have some support from mom and dad, but life was difficult. Richard Durst Jr. Grew up on the south side of Zanesville, and he's famous for saying that when he was 15, he knew that South Zanesville was a great place to be from. He didn't want to stay there. The opportunities were limited. They were so poor he couldn't pay attention, is another one that he says often. And from the earliest of ages that the boys could work, they were working because Grandma needed help. And I've heard my dad say, if I had a nickel in my pocket, it was because I earned it. But Grandma is the definition of grit. She is 97 and a half years old now, still with us, although very much declining these days. And many who have been in the Arctic family over the years know Betty. She was a part of the office. She worked with drivers. She worked with a driver newsletter. There were a variety of things that she did, and her path forward was so challenging in life with this curveball that showed up on November the 9th, 1949. And you know, that grit, it's been passed along. Many will say that Dursts are stubborn, and we are. We're very stubborn. But I'll tell you that that grit has served us well. You perhaps know people that you can think of, friends, family, in your experience, that you would define as gritty, as people who simply were not going to quit. And maybe they have faced insurmountable obstacles, and yet they have been able to fight through. They have been able to overcome the diagnosis or the challenge or the relational difficulty or their financial burden. And that's really what defines Arctic Express. We shared the great news last week in our video that we paid off the mortgage on the property after 33 years. And I'll tell you what, a lot of those years were difficult, and grit is an underlying value, characteristic of Arctic. You see, it started with my grandma, and then it was given to her kids, to my dad. And so over the years, when we've faced challenges here at Arctic, there are many business leaders who would have sold the company. There are many business leaders who would have cashed out, who would have taken their ball and gone home. But that's not how we're made. It's not how we're wired. And so whether it was a big lawsuit that went against us in the late 90s, or bankruptcy, or the recession in 2008 and 2009, we survived it all because we don't quit. And because we have people, so many wonderful employees and drivers who stuck with us when times were tough. Because I think that they looked at, I think they looked to Mr. Durst and they knew that they were working for someone who wasn't going to give up, who wasn't going to just one day say, hey, you know what, it's gotten too hard, and I think I'm just going to take the cash out of the business. He's always looked at it, because of that grittiness that he's gotten from life, as a challenge, as a problem to be solved, and as a way to keep families employed, as a way to continue to provide good work for people that he cares deeply about. Now we've come through and still are in what I'm calling the Corona days. COVID-19, 2020 has been a weird year, completely unpredictable. And you know what we're doing? We're surviving. We are surviving well, thankfully. I've said in many of our videos that we were blessed, very blessed, to be food haulers, to be considered essential workers, and to not have as great a challenge as many other businesses have had to face this year. But things certainly haven't gone the way that we anticipated them going in 2020. And yet we press forward. We are in a good position. We continue to make progress. We are continuing to service our customers and employ drivers and provide excellent service to the many customers that have created the mix of freight that has allowed us to be a surviving and thriving company since returning out of the recession in 08 and 09. But you know, I look back to Grandma Betty. And I look back to that story of her life, and I see how much influence it has had on so many in the Arctic family who know her and love her, on the upbringing of Mr. Durst and of John Durst, and the way that it has informed and motivated and pushed us to press on. Press on. No matter how challenging things become, no matter how bleak things have looked at some point in the past, there was no chance that we were going to quit. It's that grit. It's the same grit that you might have. It's the same grit that you need, because life is tough. Being a truck driver is one of the most challenging positions that somebody can take. You have to have grit if you're a driver. Now, there are some who are grittier than others, but if you're going to be a driver, an OTR driver, and 70 hours a week is your work week, that takes grit. You know, the normal world works 40 hours and goes home and complains about being tired. Not truck drivers. Other folks got sent home from work. They got furloughed. Not truck drivers. At least not our food haulers. COVID-19. It's late July 2020. There's all sorts of talk about the school year upcoming and whether teachers have to, teach students in buildings. And I'm not trying to be harsh against teachers, but, there's a lot of teachers who are saying, I'm not trained to deal with this. Well, you know what? Neither are truck drivers. And if they had gone home and just said that they're not going to continue working, guess what? Nobody has groceries. But you know what? The grit that exists amongst the truck drivers of our country has helped us continue to survive this coronavirus pandemic. And the grit that exists within the Durst family is what has allowed Arctic Express to exist for 39 years. Going into second generation at some point in the future. We're ready for the future. We're poised. We anticipate great things. But man, no matter what situation you're facing today, I wonder if Grandma Betty could inspire you just a bit to stick with it, to press on, to not quit. Whether it's your relationship, your finances, the job that you have driving for us or for somebody else. Not everything's going to go smooth. We know that. But everybody handles that differently. I just want to encourage you today to take a little inspiration from Grandma Betty. She'll turn 98 this November. I tell you what, I really don't think I've met a person who's tougher, who's survived more. She's an inspiration. I hope she's an inspiration to you.